Deep within an enchanted wood, where sunlight dripped through the trees like honey, and every rustle of leaves sounded like a whispered secret, there lived a little fox named Flora Fox. Now Flora was no ordinary fox dotto, no. Her fur was the color of fallen leaves, her eyes shone like polished amber, and her bushy tail tipped with white as snow. But what truly set Flora apart was her nose. It was a wet, black button that twitched and turned with an enthusiasm all its own. One crisp autumn morning, as the forest awoke to the sweet song of birds, Flora Fox yawned, stretched, and decided it was time for her favorite activity, foraging for delightful forest treasures. With a spring in her step and a twinkle in her eye, she set off into the woods. But before we follow Flora any further, let me ask you a question. Have you ever closed your eyes and imagined what it would be like to live in a place like this enchanting wood? To wake up to the sweet songs of birds and spend your days discovering all the delightful treasures hidden in nature? Well, if you have, then I have some exciting news for you. You see, our story takes place in a magical realm known as the Whimsical Woods, a place where imagination runs wild and anything can happen. And I am delighted to tell you that you can visit this enchanting world anytime you like, simply by closing your eyes and believing in the magic of storytelling. Now let's continue our adventure and see what Flora Fox discovers on her foraging expedition. The forest was a painter's palette, a riot of reds, golds, and browns. As Flora weaved through the trees, their leaves brushed against her fur like cool fingers. She paused to sniff a plump acorn, then continued on, her nose leading the way. Soon she came across a clearing bathed in golden sunlight. In the center stood an ancient oak, its branches gnarled and wise, its leaves long turned to crimson. Beneath the oak, nestled in a bed of moss, lay something that made Flora's heart skip a beat, a tiny house made of twigs and leaves. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, and Flora couldn't resist the urge to peek inside. She pushed aside a twig the size of her arm and gasped. The interior was like a miniature wonderland, filled with furniture crafted from acorns and berries. In the corner sat a table laden with mushroom caps and berries, each more vibrantly colored than the last. And on the wall hung a coat rack adorned with necklaces of colorful pebbles. It was the most extraordinary dwelling Flora had ever seen. Then from behind a toadstool, a tiny voice piped up, "Welcome to my humble abode." Startled, Flora jumped back. Then she saw him. Sitting on a leaf, no bigger than her paw, was the cutest little fellow she had ever laid eyes on. He was no taller than her knee, with rosy cheeks, rosy nose, and rosy lips. His eyes sparkled like dewdrops on a spider's web, and his hair was a mess of leaves the color of burnt umber. "Who are you?" Flora asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I am Hazelnutkin," he replied with a flourish. "And this is my home. Care to come in and share some tea?" Flora couldn't say no to such a charming invitation. So she followed Hazelnutkin into his cozy house. Inside, they sipped acorn tea and nibbled on dewberry toast while Hazelnutkin regaled Flora with tales of the whimsical woods. He told her about the mischievous pixies that lived in the hollowed-out tree stumps, the grumpy troll who lived under the bridge, and the talking animals that roamed the forest. Flora listened in awe, her imagination soaring like a red kite in the wind. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows through the trees, it was time for Flora to return home. She thanked Hazelnutkin for his hospitality and promised to visit again soon. With a final wave, she turned and trotted away, her mind filled with the wonders she had experienced. Back in her cozy den, curled up on a bed of moss and leaves, Flora couldn't stop thinking about the whimsical woods and its inhabitants. She dreamed of pixies and trolls and talking animals, and she couldn't wait to explore more of this magical realm. The next morning, As the sun peeked through the trees, Flora was up with the birds. She had a new determination in her step and a sparkle in her eye. She was going to find more delightful forest treasures, and she wasn't going to do it alone. She dashed through the trees, her nose twitching with excitement, calling out, "Come on, Hazel, hurry up." A moment later, a small figure popped out from behind a tree. It was Hazelnutkin, his cheeks flushed and his eyes shining with mischief. "Ready for another adventure?" he asked with a grin. Flora nodded, unable to contain her enthusiasm. They raced through the woods, following a path only the trees knew, until they reached a babbling brook. The water sparkled like 1,000 diamonds, and the air buzzed with the sound of dragonflies. "Look!" Flora exclaimed, pointing to a patch of vibrant mushrooms growing near the bank. "Let's pick some and make a delicious soup," suggested Hazelnutkin, his nose twitching with anticipation. Flora loved the idea, and they spent the afternoon gathering ingredients for their woodland feast. They found puffball mushrooms, their surfaces as smooth as alabaster, speckled with brown spots. They collected chanterelle mushrooms, their golden hues resembling tiny trumpets. And they gathered porcinis, their caps unfurling like velvet parasols. Their baskets soon overflowed with the bounty of the forest, and their hearts swelled with gratitude for nature's generosity. When the basket was full, they followed the brook until they reached a secluded clearing. In the center stood a rustic wooden hut, its roof thatched with dry grasses. Smoke curled invitingly from its chimney, promising warmth and comfort. As they approached, the aroma of pine and wood smoke enveloped them, making their mouths water in anticipation. A friendly face peered out from behind the door. It was an old badger, his eyes twinkling with kindness. "Come in, children," he boomed with a hearty laugh. "I've been expecting you." Inside, the hut was filled with the comforting scents of herbs and spices. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. The badger, whose name was Barnaby Buckleberry, welcomed them warmly and led them to a table laden with goodies. There were crusty loaves of bread, bowls of creamy mushroom soup, and platters piled high with fresh berries. After a hearty meal, Barnaby Buckleberry taught them how to identify different plants and herbs, each with its unique properties and uses. He showed them how to make soothing teas from stinging nettles and how to use dandelion roots as natural dyes. Flora and Hazelnutkin listened attentively, their minds absorbing the wealth of knowledge. As the sun dipped below the horizon, it was time for Flora and Hazelnutkin to return home. They thanked Barnaby Buckleberry for his hospitality and for sharing his wisdom. With newfound respect and admiration for the healing power of nature, they bid farewell to the badger and started their journey back. Hand in paw, they walked in silence for a while, each lost in thought. The day had been filled with so many wonders that it felt like a dream. Finally, Hazelnutkin broke the silence. "This has been the best day ever," he exclaimed, his voice echoing with joy. Flora couldn't agree more. "It sure has," she said with a smile. "The whimsical woods is full of surprises," Hazelnutkin said, his eyes twinkling. "There's so much more to discover." Flora's heart raced with excitement. Just imagine what other delightful forest treasures they might find on their next adventure together. And so their journey continued, hand in paw, into the heart of the whimsical woods, where magic and wonder awaited around every bend. The forest was alive with music. The rustle of leaves was a melody, the babbling brook a symphony, and Flora Fox, with her keen ears and curious heart, was its most ardent listener. Thank you for joining us on this enchanting adventure with Flora Fox in the whimsical woods. If you enjoyed this tale, please don't hesitate to show your support. Your likes and shares help us continue bringing these magical stories to life. Now it's time for you, dear listener, to embark on your own adventure. Go explore the world with all its wonders and let your imagination run wild. Who knows what delightful forest treasures you might discover?